reflect on a time you wish you could pause. Where are you? You just placed I in two places. This is Pause Twice. Pause Twice is a Sweet Stories podcast designed to share experiences of brands, businesses, and beings. On this channel, we share stories of self-made moguls, minds, and mentors, offering insight into how today's brands, businesses, and beings evolve across industries and dimensions. Each episode explores the intersection of personal growth, creative entrepreneurship, and market strategy, guided by our mission to inspire, inform, innovate, and immerse. With a mission to inspire, inform, innovate, and immerse the listeners, the viewers, and the creators, Sweet Stories invites you to tune in, turn off, and press play on today's self-made story. There's a version of you that already exists in the mind of someone who has never met you. Before they've read your bio, before they've seen your logo, before they've clicked a single link, they've already started building a scene around who they think you are. Based on a fragment, a photo, a caption they scrolled past for 2 seconds without even meaning to stop. A hallway conversation about you that you weren't in the room for. The question isn't whether that scene is being built. It is being built. Either way, whether you participate in it or not. The question is whether you directed it or whether you just showed up as an extra in your own story. This is Pause Twice, a Sweet Stories podcast. And I'm Amera. If this is your first time here, this show exists for the self-made moguls, the minds, and the mentors who understand a simple truth. The most successful people in the world didn't move fast. They moved intentionally. And today, we're talking about presence. Not the kind that you chase with more content, more posting, or more noise. The kind of presence that you practice deliberately. The way you'd practice anything worth being good at. This episode is about 6 strategies for building intentional presence into your brand identity, so that by the end of this episode, you know exactly how to direct the scene instead of standing inside someone else's version of it. Presence often gets treated like a numbers problem. More followers, more posts, more reach. But presence was never the problem to solve. In branding, it's the result of something else being solved first. What you're about to hear are the 6 decisions that often come before presence, the ones nobody teaches you to make on purpose. So let's start at the very beginning of the scene. Strategy 1, establish your location. Every scene needs a location. So, in the scene, before a single line gets written, before a single camera gets set up, your brand is no different. Before you touch your color palette or get started on the fun things like designing your logo, before you write a single caption, you have to decide where your brand actually lives. Does your brand exist as a mindset? Is it actually a tangible experience that is physically reachable? Or is it merely an emotional feeling? None of those are wrong or right. But here's what I mean by that. I've worked with multiple real estate brands. And here could be a situation where one is selling in the same price bracket. And yes, both real estate brands are genuinely good at their brands and at their job. One builds the identity around a mindset. Calm, it's control, it's the expertise of someone who has already solved the problem that you might be panicking about. When you walk into her world, whether you're walking into certainty, whether you're standing in her office, or you're just scrolling her brand at midnight. Now, the other brand is built around a feeling. It's that exhale of walking through a front door and knowing that somehow, before you've even set down your bags, that this is home. It's the same industry and it's the same market, and yet they're two completely different locations designed as brands. Both of them work, and not because one is right or one is wrong, and not despite that they're different, but because both of them are specific. Most brands never even make this decision consciously. They often default to whatever location feels closest that week, that time period, that chapter in their life. And then the result is a brand that technically exists everywhere, and yet truly lives nowhere. A location isn't a theme that you pick once and let that go. It's the foundation that everything gets built upon. So here's your pause. Where does your brand actually live right now? Is your brand presence? Is it a mindset that someone adopts? Is it an experience someone has? Or is it a feeling someone carries with them long after the interaction is over? And maybe it's a transaction. Does it go beyond that particular moment? I want you to sit with that for a second before you move on to the next thing. And once you know where your brand lives, the next question is, how does it behave once it's there? Strategy 2, choose your mode. Strategy 2 is about choosing your mode in your brand presence, because being intentional goes beyond just knowing your location. Once you know your location, you have to choose how you're operating inside of it. Are you in a work-focused mode, one that's precise and structured, credentialed, the kind of presence that's reassuring? Or are you in a more playful mode, warm and unexpected, a little bit unserious, the kind of presence that disengages the moment? I can think about this in different industries that I've worked with. Whether you're working as a strategist for a branding company, or you're, as my experience as a wedding planner, even in the same time periods. One, being a brand strategist and an advisor mode, that puts you into work mode. It's full focused. It's oriented differently, because when you're talking about corporate identity, it's a little bit different than when you're talking about a DJ playlist at a wedding. The wedding planner mode had to be playful. Nobody wants their wedding planned by someone who feels like a walking, talking agenda. Maybe so. But the same skill is matching the location to its mode. Applied to two different scenes, two different locations, and activating different modes. One mistake I see often is picking the wrong mode when you're in isolation, or picking a mode that doesn't match a location that you already established. A brand that lives in the location of familiarity and expertise, but operates in a mode that's constantly playful or constantly joking, it's going to confuse your audience, and it's going to confuse the very people that you might be trying to convince. Your location says one thing, and yet the mode says another. Confusion loses to clarity. Your mode is that tone of voice inside the world that you already built. It's the accessories on the foundation so you can keep building. It shouldn't be fighting against where you already exist. So here's your reflection. What mode does your content actually default to right now? On the days that you're not overthinking it, does it match that location you just named? Do they coexist in the same mental place, physical space, emotional place? Now, with your location and mode set, the next decision is about who's actually standing inside of them. So strategy 3 is where you define your character. Defining your character is often the one step that people skip. Whether it seems sincere or not, it is the one thing that changes everything else. And here's why. Inside your location, inside your mode, who are you actually embodying? Or what role are you playing? Not your job title, your character. Are you the mentor, the insider, the architect? Are you the guide who's already walked the path and simply reaching back so you can bring people alongside with you? When I built my own brand identity and presence for Sweet Stories, my intention wasn't necessarily to be the of something as much it was to carry along my expertise. Because it's more than a job title, and it's more than a character. A job title tells people what you're licensed to do and can do and have the expertise in. A character tells people who to expect when they walk through the door. I chose the character of a brand strategist, somebody that's behind the story, the person that's working off the camera, architecting the thing that everyone else eventually sees and thinks it's effortless. That character, it shapes every decision I make, from how I write to what I choose to show, and what I deliberately leave to myself and leave off camera for you to experience. A character gives your audience something to remember you as. It's long after they've forgotten the specifics of what you sell. So here's your pause. If you had to name your character in 1 or 2 words, not your job title, your character, what would it be? Could you write it down? Could you define it to 1 word, 2 words, 3 words? Write it down. You're going to need it for the next part of the strategy. So now we're 3 strategies in, and we've got 3 to go out of the 6. This is usually where in the episode I'm going to point to you keep going. Don't stop. Keep going. But that's not what I'm going to do here, because that defies the premise of the show. I want you to pause. Actually pause for a moment and say your character out loud. The one that you just chose. Before we move on, let's keep building. Now, take your location, your mode, and your character and put them together in one frame. Because here is strategy 4. Clarify the identity. Strategy number 4 is clarify the identity. Imagine this. Someone else has to illustrate your entire brand as a scene. They're not describing in a paragraph. No, they're illustrating it frame by frame. What would it sound like? What would it look like? What would it feel like? And what would it seem like to somebody that's standing inside of it for the very first time? This is something I ask my clients to do, literally out loud in a working session. Visualize, visualize, visualize. I've had founders tell me that their brand sounds fragmented. It's low and warm, like a conversation that's not going anywhere. And that's not somewhere that you would want to be. But I've also had other people tell me that their brand sounds familiar, famous, and it gets right to the point. Their audience just doesn't have the patience for anything else. And once again, neither one is right or wrong. But most people have never actually answered the question. So their brand ends up sounding like whatever mood they happen to be in the day that they wrote that caption, started an idea, or went along with their story. Clarity here isn't a decoration. It's the difference between a brand that people can describe to a friend, a brand that people can only gesture at, and brands that people continue the relationship beyond the transaction. So here's your reflection. If your brand had a soundtrack, one sentence, what would it sound like? Say it out loud, even if it feels strange to. You'll know immediately whether it's true or whether you're just describing what you think it's supposed to sound like. Think of that illustration, because once this scene is clear in your own mind, it has to be written down, because a scene that nobody scripted is a scene that just changes every time it's told. Are you ready for strategy 5? Strategy 5 is write a transcript. Strategy 5 is write a transcript. And this one is near and dear to me because it's exactly what we're doing right now in this conversation. There's a transcript that allows preparation, mental rehearsal. A transcript is a comprehensive, line by line script of your brand's narrative. It's not just a vague sense of your voice that lives somewhere inside of your head. No, it has actual words. What does your biography say word for word? Do you know how your own brand describes you? What's the first line a client actually hears from you? And what does your about page say? The version that's on your website right now. Not the one that you're thinking I should fix or update or make sure it's consistent. Do you know? I know stories of people that have one story on LinkedIn and another story on Instagram, but it's different than the one that's on their brand biography. And they send out media kits that have different conversations entirely. Those are 3 transcripts with 3 characters and likely a confused audience that's quietly trying to figure out which version is the real one. The fix isn't an entire rebrand. It's not a redesign of your entire brand identity. No, it's rehearsing the script with the actual words, the way that you'd script a production. So every touch point becomes one continuous scene instead of 3 unrelated ones that are working to communicate to the same audience with different messages. Because a brand without a transcript is being improvised in public. People will make up their own story, one caption at a time, and it's improv for years. And then that starts to look like inconsistency, and you could have a growing brand one way and fragmented in the other. So here's your reflection. If your brand walked into a room, had its own introduction that was said out loud, what's the very first line that it would say? Could you write that line down exactly as you'd say it out loud. Okay, there's one strategy left. It's the one that decides whether anyone actually encounters the scene that you just built. Strategy 6 is strategic placement. This is the final strategy. Strategic placement is the one that ties the physical and the non-physical realms together. Where does your logo show up? If you don't have a logo, where does your face show up? Where does your identity actually exist? And then where does it show up? Not where you assume it shows up. No, where it actually physically and digitally appears in someone's day. Real estate, you could have an agent with their face on every sign in our market, every yard sign, every bus bench, every mailer that lands in a mailbox, every post mailer that gets to their email. But yet when a client searches for them 10 o'clock at night at home before ever picking up the phone to call, they might not find the person that they saw on the signs, on the bus benches, and in that mailer. It's a different tone. It's a different energy. And the presence that was in the physical world is disconnected from the digital world. The physical placement is strong. The non-physical placement is almost invisible. And in a world where we're searching and we're online, the gap between the two realms is exactly where brand familiarity is either going to be built or it's going to disintegrate and break long before you as a brand could ever know what's happening. So placement isn't about being everywhere. It's about being somewhere and exactly where you want it to be. It's about being the same person everywhere you are. So whichever realm you show up in, someone else can find you there. They recognize you and they recognize you and they recognize you. They find you the way that you were designed to be. So here's your final reflection. Walk through what we just talked about. The 6 strategies. Walk through your own placement, honestly. Where does your identity show up physically? Where does it show up digitally? Is there a version of you in one realm that a complete stranger simply wouldn't recognize in the other? Location, mode, character, identity, transcript, placement, the 6 decisions made once that quietly direct every scene your brand ever appears in after this episode. And yet underneath all 6 of them lies the same idea we come back to on this show over and over and will continue in every and any form that it takes. Presence isn't something that you have to chase by doing more. It's something you practice by getting clear. Identity has to come first, and then presence follows as its amplifier. Experience becomes the proof when someone actually engages with what you've built. And growth is simply what happens when all 3 are working together rather than competing against one another. Presence is what identity looks like when it's finally been given somewhere to be represented. And that's a part of what Pause Twice is here for. I'm here to inspire, to inform, to innovate, and to immerse you. For the self-made moguls, the minds, and the mentors who already know the words that I keep circling back to. And for the most successful people who didn't move fast enough, but moved intentionally. Your brand is so worthy of that same intention, scene by scene, line by line, strategy by strategy, until the version of you that exists in someone's mind before they ever meet you is finally the version you intentionally chose. It's not the one that's built for you. It's not the one given to you. And it's not the one that you are piecing together yourself. It's where you exist intentionally. Because if your brand identity isn't showing, your brand presence isn't growing. That's what that episode's about. Distilled down to one sentence. And now, that wraps up this episode of Pause Twice. So if something here has made you pause, even for a second, then that is where you can pause twice. Where are you then? Where are you now? Stay connected with Pause Twice, the podcast, through Sweet Stories YouTube channel, or listen on your podcast streaming channels. I'm Amera. You can find me at aboutamera.com, and you can follow along at Sweet Stories online on social at Sweet Stories. And if this episode has resonated with you, share it with your team, send it to somebody that you know is building a brand, and grow together. And ask yourself, where would you pause twice? Thank you for listening to this episode of Pause Twice. I'm Amera, and I'd love to stay connected with you at Sweet Stories. Sweet Stories is online anytime. Be sure to find Pause Twice on your podcast streaming channels and watch on YouTube. Remember to subscribe for recent episodes, and if anything inspired, informed, innovated, or immersed you into the new and next, share the sweetness. Go press play on your brand experience and ask yourself, where will I pause twice? This is Pause Twice, powered by Sweet Stories, the advertainment company.